The applause was still echoing beyond the velvet curtain when Daniel Hayes pushed open the door to his dressing room. His voice had filled the arena minutes ago, but now only silence waited inside, the kind of silence that feels too still. He'd been on stage for 2 hours, his heart pouring into every lyric, every note, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight before him. A woman sat in the corner of the room, her back turned slightly toward the door. Her skin, the color of deep bronze, shimmered under the soft light. Her hair was coiled into gentle curls that framed her face with quiet strength. In her arms, a baby, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. She wasn't crying, wasn't startled. She simply looked at him, as if she'd been waiting. Daniel froze. His throat tightened. "Who are you?" he managed to say. The woman looked up slowly, her eyes soft but steady. "My name is Laura Bennett," she said. "And this," she glanced down at the baby, then back at Daniel. "This is your son." The world stopped moving. The hum of the lights faded. The air itself seemed to thin. Daniel took a step forward, his chest burning as if he'd been punched from the inside. "That's not possible," he whispered. Laura only looked at him. No anger, no accusation, just a painful truth resting in her gaze. "You deserve to know," she said softly, "because I can't carry this secret anymore." And for the first time in years, Daniel Hayes, the man who had faced millions, couldn't find a single word to say. Before we continue this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It's always a joy to know how far our stories travel. Stay with us until the end. The truth behind this moment will leave you speechless. Before the quiet moment in that dressing room, Daniel Hayes was the man who had everything, or at least, that's what the world believed. His songs had ruled the charts for over a decade, his face shone on billboards from Los Angeles to New York, and every sold-out show ended with fans chanting his name long after he'd left the stage. But fame had a cruel habit of giving and taking in equal measure. 5 years earlier, Daniel had lost his wife, Emily, in a tragic accident that shattered the life he'd built. The tabloids turned his pain into headlines. The world turned his grief into gossip. Since then, he'd lived only for the music, never for himself. He didn't believe in second chances, and he certainly didn't believe in miracles. But that night, fate had other plans. When Daniel opened that door and found Laura Bennett, a quiet woman with eyes full of memories and a baby in her arms, he didn't realize he was about to confront the one truth he'd been running from all these years. The past was not done with him yet. Daniel stood frozen, his hand still gripping the brass doorknob, as though letting go would somehow make this moment real. The faint hum of the arena faded behind the thick walls, replaced by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the baby in Laura's arms. The scent of stage perfume and sweat mixed oddly with something pure, the scent of milk and innocence. He took a slow step forward. "You can't just walk in here," he said, his voice trembling between anger and confusion. "How did you even get past security?" Laura looked up, calm but visibly exhausted. Her dark skin glowed under the dim vanity lights, and there was something about her presence, quiet, steady, unshaken, that made Daniel hesitate. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she replied softly. "I just needed you to see him." Daniel's eyes darted toward the baby. His chest tightened again. "You said he's mine." Laura nodded once, not flinching. "His name is Eli. He's 10 months old." "That's impossible." Daniel took another step closer, his voice rising. "I don't even know you." Laura's lips trembled, but she didn't back down. "You knew me, Daniel, a long time ago. We met in Memphis after one of your charity concerts. I worked at the hotel." His brows furrowed. The words felt distant, blurred by the fog of years spent on the road, countless faces, fleeting nights. But something about her tone, the way she said Memphis, struck a chord somewhere deep in his memory. "You're lying," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I would have remembered." Laura's eyes filled with quiet pain. "Maybe you would have, if things had gone differently." Daniel felt his pulse pounding in his ears. The baby stirred, letting out a tiny sigh before falling back asleep in her arms. The sight disarmed him, this fragile life that bore no resemblance to the chaos in his chest. "You can't just show up here claiming something like that," Daniel said, his voice low now, steadier but laced with fear. "Do you have any proof?" Laura reached into her worn bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I didn't come here to trap you or ask for anything," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But you deserve the truth, and so does he." Daniel hesitated before taking the paper. His hands shook as he unfolded it, a birth certificate, faded from handling. His name stared back at him. Father, Daniel Hayes. For a moment, everything inside him went quiet. He looked up at her, the air thick between them. "This can't be real," he whispered. Laura's eyes glistened. "I wish it wasn't," she said softly. "But it is." He looked again at the baby, searching desperately for something familiar. A nose, a smile, anything. "Why now?" he demanded finally. "Why come after all this time?" Laura swallowed hard. "Because I couldn't keep hiding. Not from him. Not from you." The room felt smaller with every word she spoke. Daniel's reflection in the vanity mirror looked like a stranger. The famous man, the polished artist, suddenly stripped of control. He paced to the window, staring at the city lights. "You realize what you're saying could ruin everything I've built," he said bitterly. Laura stood up slowly, cradling Eli against her chest. "Maybe," she said, "but what you built was never the whole truth." Daniel turned, his jaw tightening. "You expect me to believe you? To just accept this?" "No," Laura said gently. "I just expect you to look at him." He hesitated, then took a single, trembling step closer. Laura loosened her hold just enough for Daniel to see Eli's face clearly for the first time. The baby's eyes, wide, curious, and heartbreakingly familiar, looked up at him. They were the same shade of blue as Emily's. The world seemed to tilt. Daniel's breath caught, his throat tightening as a memory flashed. Emily laughing in their kitchen, her eyes bright under morning light. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, unable to face what his heart was already admitting. Laura watched him silently, her own eyes wet. "I didn't want to do this here," she said quietly. "But you needed to know before someone else told you their version of the story." Daniel turned sharply. "Someone else?" Laura bit her lip, hesitating. Not everyone wanted this truth to come out. Daniel took a step closer, his confusion deepening into dread. "What do you mean by that?" Laura held his gaze. "You'll understand soon," she said. "But first, you need to decide if you're ready to know everything." The silence between them grew heavy, two lives colliding under the harsh lights of a dressing room, the echoes of fame and heartbreak still clinging to the air. For the first time in years, Daniel realized he wasn't the man everyone thought he was, and that the truth, no matter how painful, had finally found him. And as the baby stirred again, Daniel knew that whatever lay ahead, the world he thought he knew was about to unravel. The dressing room had fallen silent. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner broke the stillness. That, and the sound of Daniel's unsteady breathing. He stood there, staring at the birth certificate again, as though the ink might rearrange itself and give him a different truth. But it didn't. It stayed the same. Daniel Hayes, father. He looked up at Laura, who was sitting quietly now, humming softly as Eli nursed. There was something hauntingly peaceful about her presence, like she'd already accepted the storm that was coming. Daniel, however, felt like the ground beneath him had been pulled away. "Memphis," he finally said, almost whispering. "You said we met in Memphis." Laura nodded. "You were staying at the Crescent Hotel. You'd just done that charity concert for the Children's Hospital. I was working the night shift at the front desk." Daniel ran a hand over his face. His memories of those years were a blur of hotel rooms, flashing lights, and moments that barely felt real. "That was 6 years ago," he muttered. 7, Laura corrected softly. "It was the summer of 2018. Daniel's gaze flickered to her. She remembered the year, the season, everything. "You're saying you were lost," Laura interrupted gently, not out of disrespect, but mercy. "I think you were running from something back then." His jaw tightened. Emily. The name alone still felt like a wound that hadn't closed. "My wife had just died," he said quietly. I was barely breathing. Everything after that year was a blur. Laura's eyes softened, but she didn't look away. I didn't know who you were. Not at first, she said. I just saw a man sitting alone in the lobby at 3 in the morning, still wearing his stage clothes, staring at nothing. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He remembered that night, the loneliness, the weight of the world pressing down on him. But not her, not the moment that would change everything. So, you came here after all this time just to tell me I have a son? He asked. Why now? Laura hesitated, then reached into her bag again. Because I found this. She slid a small, creased photograph across the vanity table. Daniel looked down at it. It was a picture of him younger, his arm around a smiling woman. Laura. They were standing outside a hospital. In his hand, he held a small bouquet of flowers. Daniel stared at the image in disbelief. I don't remember this, he whispered. I didn't think you would, Laura said quietly. You were there that day because someone called you. They told you a child needed your support. A charity visit, that's what they said. But that wasn't true. He looked up sharply. What do you mean? That was the day Eli was born, Laura said. And someone made sure you'd be there. Just long enough to take that photo and walk away before I could reach you. Daniel's stomach twisted. Who? Laura's expression darkened. Your manager, Mark. Daniel froze. That's impossible, he said. Mark's been with me since the beginning. He's family. Laura shook her head. He was the one who handled the charity that brought you to Memphis. He arranged everything, the hotel, the hospital visit. I didn't think much of it until I went back through my old messages and found his number linked to every contact I had back then. He knew about me, Daniel. He knew about Eli. Daniel took a step back, his pulse racing. Mark had always been there, the loyal friend, the one who cleaned up after every scandal, every mistake. He'd trusted him with everything. But why would he hide this? Are you saying he knew I had a child? Daniel's voice cracked. I'm saying, Laura replied carefully, that someone made sure you wouldn't. He sank onto the couch, staring at the photo again. His mind replayed every conversation, every decision Mark had made for his own good. The tours, the contracts, the relentless push to stay in the public eye. It had always been about control. But this was something else. Laura stood, rocking Eli gently. I didn't want to believe it either, she said. But when I tried to reach out years ago, I got an email from someone claiming to represent you. They told me to stay quiet, that it would be better for everyone. Daniel's hands trembled. Better for him, maybe. Laura looked at him then, and there was something almost maternal in her gaze. Not pity, but understanding. You've been living in a cage, Daniel. You just didn't know it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel's reflection in the vanity mirror looked like a ghost. A man who had everything the world could offer, and yet somehow, nothing that was real. He looked at the photo again, his thumb brushing over Laura's younger face. It was me. I was there, I just didn't know what I was walking into. I need to talk to Mark, Daniel said finally, his voice low, controlled, and dangerous. I need to hear him say it. Laura nodded slowly. Then you should do it soon, she said. Because if he's hidden something like this from you, I don't think you're the only one he's lied to. Daniel rose to his feet, his decision already made. The walls that once made him feel safe, the applause, the fame, the image, now felt like a trap closing in. He grabbed his coat and turned toward the door, but Laura's voice stopped him. Be careful, Daniel, she said softly. People like him don't bury the truth without reason. Daniel glanced back once, his eyes flicking between Laura, Eli, and the photo that had changed everything. Then, I guess it's time to find out what that reason is. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway, a man finally walking out of his illusion, straight toward the storm. And as Daniel dialed Mark's number, one question echoed in his mind. How many lies had been told to keep him from his own son? Daniel's car tore through the rain-slick streets of downtown Nashville, windshield wipers thrashing furiously as if trying to match the chaos in his head. His phone still glowed with the unanswered call to Mark. 3 rings, then voicemail, again and again. "Pick up," Daniel muttered under his breath, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The man had been at every turning point of his life. Every record deal, every public apology, every tearful press conference. Mark didn't ignore calls from Daniel Hayes. Not ever. He turned onto 7th Avenue, the neon lights of a downtown bar glinting through the rain. Mark's black SUV was parked outside. Daniel's pulse quickened. He parked across the street, slammed the door, and jogged through the rain toward the entrance. Inside, the air smelled like whiskey and burnt sugar. The crowd buzzed with late-night chatter, but none of it registered. He spotted Mark immediately, seated at a corner booth, laughing with a couple of industry faces, his phone face down on the table. Daniel didn't wait for politeness. He stormed over, the sound of his boots slicing through the noise. "We need to talk," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Mark's laughter died instantly. He looked up, startled, and forced a smile. "Danny, hey, you should have called first." "I did." Daniel's voice was low but dangerous. "You just didn't answer." The table went silent. Mark dismissed his companions with a nervous wave. "Give us a minute, guys." They didn't need convincing. They scattered like birds sensing a storm. Mark stood, forcing a chuckle that didn't quite land. "Okay, what's going on? You look like hell, man." Daniel leaned in close, his eyes cold. "You tell me. Why did a woman named Laura show up tonight, with a baby that's supposed to be mine?" For the first time, Daniel saw something flicker in Mark's expression. Not surprise, but hesitation. "Daniel," Mark said slowly, raising his hands as if calming a wild animal, "I need you to take a breath before we—" "Don't!" Daniel snapped. "Don't tell me to breathe. Tell me the truth." Mark sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I think I do." Daniel's tone darkened. "I'm asking why my name is on a birth certificate I never saw. Why someone arranged a photo of me outside a hospital I don't remember visiting. Why I was kept in the dark about my own child." Mark looked away. "It wasn't that simple." "Then make it simple," Daniel growled. The older man exhaled slowly and sank back into his seat. "Fine. You want the truth? You were a wreck back then, Daniel. Emily had just passed. You were drinking too much, sleeping too little, spiraling. Every headline was about your breakdown. I was doing everything I could to keep you from burning your career to the ground." Daniel crossed his arms. "So you decided to burn my life instead?" Mark hesitated. Laura wasn't supposed to keep the baby. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. "What did you just say?" Mark looked up, guilt heavy in his eyes. "The charity you did in Memphis, the hospital visit, that was real. But Laura came to me later, said she was pregnant. She wanted to tell you I told her it wasn't the right time, that you couldn't handle it." Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "You told her not to tell me?" Mark didn't answer. Daniel slammed his fist on the table, the sound echoing through the quiet bar. "You had no right." "I saved you," Mark shot back, his calm cracking for the first time. "You think the world would have shown you mercy back then? A widower with a secret child? The press would have torn you apart, sponsors, record labels, they'd have walked away. You wouldn't have survived it, Daniel." "I didn't survive it." Daniel's voice broke. "I've been living half a life since the day Emily died. You just made sure I never got the other half back." The bar went deathly silent around them. Mark rubbed his temples, eyes darting to the door. "You don't understand the things I had to do to keep your name clean. The people I had to silence." Daniel froze. "What people?" Mark didn't answer, but that single beat of silence said everything. Daniel leaned in, his voice low and sharp. "You covered it up." Mark met his eyes, his tone heavy with something close to regret. "I protected you." Daniel stood, shaking his head. "No, you protected your business." He threw a few bills on the table, though neither of them had ordered anything. "You took away years I can never get back," he said quietly. "A boy grew up without his father because you decided I wasn't ready. You don't get to decide that for me." Mark looked up, desperation creeping into his face. "Danny, please. You can't undo what's been done. Let me handle it before it gets out of control." Daniel turned toward the door. "It's already out of control." He paused at the exit, the rain pounding against the glass. "And for the first time in my life, Mark, I don't care who finds out." As Daniel stepped back into the storm, the truth finally began to sink in. Not just that he had been lied to, but that the person he trusted most had decided who he was allowed to be. He climbed into his car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The photo Laura had given him sat on the passenger seat, the edges curled and worn. He stared at it for a long moment, at the man he once was, and the life that could have been. The road ahead blurred through the rain, but Daniel didn't hesitate. For the first time in years, he had a direction, and it led straight toward the truth. As lightning split the night sky, Daniel knew there was no going back. Somewhere between fame and silence, he'd lost the truth. But now, he was ready to face the cost of finding it. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of his phone vibrating violently on the nightstand. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. Texts, missed calls, headlines. He blinked against the harsh morning light and reached for it, still half asleep. But then he saw it. Daniel Hayes' secret son. Mystery woman emerges after concert. Singer's hidden past. Who is Laura Green? Breaking. The photo that could end Daniel Hayes' career. The blood drained from his face. He sat up, the sheets falling to his waist, and stared at the flood of articles, each one splashing the same grainy image across every page. The photo Laura had shown him, the one outside the hospital. Except now, the caption screamed betrayal. He scrolled through the comments, his heart sinking with every cruel word. Another rock star deadbeat. Guess fame runs faster than responsibility. Poor woman. He left her to raise the kid alone. Daniel threw the phone onto the bed, running a hand through his hair. No, no, no. His phone started ringing again. Mark. Daniel stared at the name flashing on the screen. For a long moment he considered ignoring it. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, won. He answered, his voice flat. "You leaked it." Mark's tone was tight, rushed. "It wasn't me." "Then who was it?" Daniel snapped. "I don't know, but the story's spreading fast. TMZ, Variety, The Post, they've all got it. Someone sent them the photo and the birth record. You need to stay quiet, Daniel. Don't say a word to the press." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Stay quiet? That's how this started." "Listen to me." Mark's voice rose. "We can contain this if we move fast. We'll say the woman's lying, that it's a scam. You know how these things go. We just have to weather the storm." Daniel's stomach turned. "You want me to deny my own son?" Mark hesitated. "Until we know what's provable. Yes. The public doesn't need every messy detail." Daniel's voice hardened. "The public doesn't matter, he does." Mark sighed heavily. "Daniel, your entire image is built on being the grieving widower who turned his pain into art. This," he paused, "this destroys that." "Then maybe it deserves to be destroyed," Daniel said coldly, and hung up. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the city outside his window. The streets were already alive with noise, people going about their day, unaware that his entire life was unraveling in real time. The knock at the door startled him. He wasn't expecting anyone. He opened it to find Laura, her expression pale and anxious, holding Eli close against her chest. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "They were waiting outside my apartment this morning. Photographers, neighbors whispering. I had to leave." Daniel felt a pang of guilt cut through him. "You shouldn't have to deal with this," he said. "Not because of me." She shook her head. "They would have found out eventually. But they're twisting it, Daniel. They're making it sound like I chased you for money." Daniel clenched his jaw. "They always twist the truth." She glanced toward the window where the city glimmered beyond the rain. "What are you going to do?" Daniel hesitated. "Tell the truth." "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "It'll cost you everything." He looked at Eli, the child's small fingers curling around his mother's necklace, unaware of the chaos outside. "If I lose everything for him," Daniel said, "then it's worth it." Laura's eyes filled with quiet relief. "Then you're not the man they say you are." Before Daniel could answer, his phone buzzed again, this time with a new notification. Breaking. Daniel Hayes to address rumors live at 6 p.m. He froze. "I didn't agree to that." Laura frowned. "Then who did?" Daniel grabbed the phone and called his publicist. The moment she answered, he demanded, "Who scheduled that press conference?" There was a pause. "Mark." Daniel's chest tightened. "Of course." "Cancel it," he said sharply. "I can't. He's already confirmed the venue and sent a statement to the networks. It's happening." Daniel hung up. The betrayal felt complete now. The manipulation had shifted from his past to his present. He turned to Laura. "If he's going to speak for me, then I'm going to speak for myself." She blinked. "Daniel, you can't just—" But he was already pulling on his jacket. "I've let him control my story for too long." Laura stepped forward, gripping his arm. "Then promise me one thing. Whatever you say out there, don't let them make you ashamed of what's true." He looked at her, his expression softening. "I won't." Outside, reporters were already gathering like vultures near the studio. Daniel stepped out into the flashing lights, each question fired like a bullet. "Daniel, is it true? Do you deny being the father? Is this woman blackmailing you?" He stopped at the podium, his reflection caught in a sea of cameras. For a brief second, the noise faded. All he saw was Eli's face in his mind. Small, trusting, real. He took a deep breath. "I've made mistakes," he began. "But the one I won't make again is letting someone else decide what my truth is." The room went silent. "Yes," he continued, his voice steady. "That woman is Laura Green, and that child is my son." A wave of murmurs swept through the press room, flashes erupting like lightning. "I didn't know until last night," Daniel said, his voice cracking with raw honesty. "But now that I do, I intend to be in his life, no matter what it costs me." He stepped back from the microphone, the reporters shouting over each other. But he didn't stay to listen. The storm he'd feared his whole career had finally arrived, and for once he wasn't running. As he exited through the side door, Laura was waiting, Eli asleep in her arms. She met his eyes with a faint, knowing smile. "You just changed everything," she whispered. Daniel exhaled, rain already soaking through his shirt. "Yeah," he said softly, "but maybe it's time everything changed." And as the headlines exploded across the world, Daniel realized that truth, once spoken aloud, could never be taken back. But maybe, just maybe, it could set him free. The next morning, the world had already chosen sides. Every news channel, every podcast, every social media post seemed to orbit around one man, Daniel Hayes. His press conference had gone viral overnight. Some called him brave, others called him reckless. But no one ignored him. The headlines read like battle cries. "Daniel Hayes admits secret son, fans divided." "Truth or PR stunt? Singer's emotional confession sparks debate." Daniel watched it unfold from the couch in his apartment, dark circles under his eyes, untouched coffee going cold in his hands. On one screen, a late-night host joked, "Guess heartbreak sells records, but babies ruin contracts." On another, a fan page played the clip of him saying, "That child is my son," over and over, set to a montage of his love songs. It was chaos. Across town, Laura scrolled through her phone, her heart tightening with each cruel comment. Some defended her, most didn't. The internet had decided she was the villain, the opportunist, the homewrecker, the woman who had trapped America's grieving idol. But worse than the comments were the messages. Dozens of them, some anonymous, others from reporters who had somehow found her old address. Then one message stopped her cold. "Laura Bennett isn't even her real name. Ask her about Savannah Green." Her breath hitched. The name she hadn't heard in years. Her past. Daniel's world crumbles. By midday, Daniel's record label called an emergency meeting. He walked into the boardroom expecting damage control. What he got instead was a firing squad. "Daniel, we've stood by you through a lot," said Greg Tully, the label's executive, voice syrupy but sharp. "But this blindsided us." "I didn't know, Greg," Daniel said, calm but exhausted. "You can't blame me for learning the truth about my own son." Greg sighed. "The truth isn't the issue. The timing is. We were about to sign your renewal for the next tour. Sponsors are calling. They want statements, assurance, control." "I'm not doing another cover-up," Daniel replied firmly. Greg exchanged a look with one of the PR officers. "Then you're on your own." And just like that, the meeting ended. Daniel walked out of the office, his phone buzzing nonstop. His calendar cleared itself before his eyes. Endorsements canceled. Appearances postponed indefinitely. His so-called empire was collapsing faster than he'd built it. He sat in his car for nearly an hour, staring at nothing. The city felt different now. Colder, heavier, quieter. Laura's secret. That night, Daniel drove to the small apartment where Laura had been staying. She opened the door before he even knocked, as if she had been expecting him. "You look tired," she said softly. "I've had better weeks," he replied with a tired smile. "You?" Laura hesitated. "It's getting ugly online. Someone dug into my past," Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She walked to the kitchen table and handed him her phone. On the screen was an old article, a photo of a young woman in handcuffs. The headline read, "Local waitress arrested in check fraud scheme. Claims innocence." Daniel blinked. The woman in the picture was her, younger, thinner, terrified. "Laura, I was 21, she said quickly. "I worked at a diner. My boss used my name to cash fake checks. I was the one who got blamed. I didn't have money for a lawyer, so I took the deal at probation. They expunged it years later, but—" Daniel looked at her, stunned into silence. "That's why I changed my name," she continued, her voice trembling. "From Savannah Green to Laura Bennett. I just wanted a fresh start. I didn't want anyone to know, not even you." Daniel set the phone down, leaning against the counter. "You think someone leaked this?" She nodded. "Mark would know where to look." Daniel clenched his jaw. "He's trying to destroy you, to make you look like a liar so no one believes you." Laura exhaled shakily. "And it's working." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "Hey, look at me." She did. "I don't care who you were, Laura," Daniel said. "I care who you are. You kept my son safe. You told me the truth when everyone else lied. That's all that matters to me." Tears welled in her eyes. "You really mean that?" "I do." For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people the world had turned into headlines, finding peace in a shared silence. Then Daniel's phone buzzed again. A new headline. "Exclusive interview. Manager Mark Reynolds speaks out." He read the preview text aloud, disbelief spreading across his face. "Daniel Hayes is confused. The child isn't his." Laura's blood ran cold. "He didn't." "Oh, he did," Daniel muttered, throwing the phone onto the table. "He's painting me as delusional." The newsfeed updated again. A clip began to autoplay. Mark sitting confidently across from a talk show host, his tone cool and composed. "Daniel's been under a lot of emotional strain," Mark said. "He's always been generous, sometimes too trusting. I think this woman saw that and took advantage." Laura covered her mouth, fighting tears. Daniel stared at the screen, fury burning behind his calm. "He's using the same playbook. Twist the truth. Make it look like I'm the unstable one." Laura's voice broke. "What if people believe him?" Daniel turned toward her, his face hardening. "Then I'll show them proof they can't ignore." As night fell over the city, Daniel sat alone in his studio, staring at the single photograph Laura had given him, the one of them outside the hospital, the only piece of evidence left that tied truth to memory. He reached for his phone and called Grace Miller, his longtime assistant, one of the few people he still trusted. "Grace," he said quietly, "I need you to help me find something." "Anything," she replied. "I need every file, every receipt, every email Mark ever sent during that summer in Memphis. If he buried the truth, I want to dig it back up." Grace's voice softened. "Daniel, what are you planning to do?" He stared at the photo again, his reflection faint in the glass. "I'm going to remind the world who I really am." And as Daniel prepared to face the storm head-on, he didn't realize that the next truth waiting to surface wouldn't just change his career. It would change everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and redemption. The night had swallowed the city whole, but Daniel Hayes wasn't asleep. He sat in his dimly lit studio, surrounded by fragments of a life that no longer felt like his own. Gold records glinting in the dark, half-written lyrics scattered across the desk, and his phone resting face down beside a cold cup of coffee. Across the room, Grace Miller, his longtime assistant, worked quietly at the computer, her fingers dancing over the keys as she searched through the archives Daniel had asked for. The only sound was the gentle clicking of the mouse and the steady hum of the computer fan. "Found it," Grace said suddenly, her voice a mix of triumph and disbelief. Daniel looked up, his tired eyes narrowing. "What is it?" She turned the screen toward him. "An email chain from 7 years ago, between Mark and a hospital administrator in Memphis." Daniel stood and leaned in. The subject line read, "Re-confidential records, Laura Bennett." Grace clicked open the thread. It was all there, in black and white. Mark instructing the hospital to seal the birth certificate, citing artist privacy concerns and public image protection. And beneath that, one line that made Daniel's stomach twist. "Ensure the father's name remains visible only in internal copies. The original should be amended per prior arrangement." Daniel felt the breath leave his body. He altered a legal document. Grace nodded gravely. "And the payment came from one of your charity accounts." He made it look like a donation. Daniel clenched his fists. "He used my own money to erase my son." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The truth, the full, unfiltered truth, hung between them like smoke. Grace broke the silence. "What do you want to do with this?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "End it, all of it." The confrontation. An hour later, Daniel stood in the rain outside the studio building where Mark's office was located. The storm had rolled in fast, wind whipping through the streets, thunder echoing off glass towers. Inside, the lobby was empty. Mark's light was still on upstairs. Daniel took the elevator without hesitation, the flash drive burning like a secret in his pocket. When the doors opened, Mark was there, sitting at his desk, sleeves rolled up, drink in hand, watching the city through the window like a man admiring the empire he'd built. "Daniel," he said without turning around, "I was wondering when you'd come." Daniel stepped inside, the door shutting behind him with a soft click. "You already know why I'm here." Mark finally turned, his expression unreadable. "You've made a mess of things. The label's furious. You humiliated yourself on live television. I've been cleaning up your name for hours." Daniel laughed, a humorless, broken sound. "You spent years cleaning up my life too, didn't you? Only this time I've got proof." He tossed the flash drive onto the desk. It clattered against the glass surface, spinning once before stopping in front of Mark. Mark looked down at it, then back up. "What's that?" "Everything," Daniel said. "Emails, payments, hospital records, your entire cover-up. You used my money to change a child's birth certificate. You lied to me, lied to her. And when the truth finally surfaced, you tried to destroy her reputation." Mark exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. "You're angry. I get it. But don't pretend you'd have handled it differently." Daniel's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare." "You were grieving, Daniel," Mark said, his tone rising. "You were unstable. You could barely finish a show without breaking down. The world loved you because you were tragic, because your story sold. I just made sure it stayed that way." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "You think you were protecting me?" "I saved you," Mark said fiercely. I built you back up when everyone else wanted to watch you fall apart. And you repay me by throwing it all away for a scandal? For a woman who saw an opportunity? Daniel's hand slammed against the desk. She's not a scandal. She's the mother of my son. For a brief second, Mark flinched, a crack in the armor. You think this industry forgives men like you for being human? They'll tear you apart, Daniel. You'll lose everything, the contracts, the fans, the legacy. You'll end up just another washed-up name on a nostalgia tour. Daniel took a step closer. Then so be it. At least I'll be a father. Mark rose from his chair, his face hardening. You're going to regret this. Daniel met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Maybe, but I've been living with regret long enough. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small recording device. By the way, he said, pressing the stop button, you might want to work on your definition of confidentiality. Mark's eyes widened. You didn't. I did. Daniel slipped the recorder into his pocket. And tomorrow morning that recording, along with every document on that drive, will be sent to every news outlet in the country. Mark's composure shattered. Daniel, think about what you're doing. I have. And with that, Daniel turned and walked toward the door. Daniel, Mark called after him, desperation seeping into his voice. You'll destroy yourself. Daniel paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. No, Mark, you already did that. I'm just rebuilding what's left. Then he left, leaving the door open and the storm's howl echoing through the empty office. By sunrise, the world had changed again. The headlines that had once condemned him now told a different story. Exclusive. Manager manipulated Daniel Hayes' career, leaked false statements. Duisinger's courage exposes industry secrets. Truth comes at a cost, Hayes says. Public opinion shifted overnight. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't seen as a symbol of tragedy, but as a man who had finally taken back his own story. Across town, Laura stood at her small apartment window, holding Eli in her arms as the morning light crept across the floor. Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Daniel. It's over. He's gone. We're free. She smiled through tears, pressing the phone to her chest. Eli stirred, yawning softly. See, sweetheart, she whispered. He kept his promise. A few weeks later, Daniel returned to the studio, not to record for the label, but for himself. He sat at the piano, the microphone on, the red light blinking softly. His fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment before he began to play. Slow, tender chords that filled the room with quiet strength. Grace watched through the glass window, tears in her eyes. The lyrics flowed easily now, each word a piece of everything he'd lost and found again. You can bury the truth in the dark for years, but light finds its way through the pain and the fear. And if love is the fight that we're born to choose, then losing it all means I've nothing to lose. When he finished, the silence was beautiful. He looked up at the framed photo on the wall, one of Laura and Eli taken in the park a week earlier. The little boy was laughing. Laura was looking at him with a smile that made everything else fade away. Daniel smiled softly, whispering to himself, this time it's real. Sometimes the truth doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to rebuild you. Fame fades, lies fall apart, and the stories we hide from the world eventually find their way back to us. But when they do, they remind us that redemption isn't about the mistakes we've made. It's about the courage to face them. If this story moved you, share where you're watching from and tell us. Would you have had the courage to tell the truth, even if it cost you everything? Stay with us for the next story on Tales That Travel, where hearts break, heal, and remind us that life, no matter how far it takes us, always finds its way home.